Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. I'm just sitting here drinking my morning coffee. You guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And for those of you who like these type of videos, please remember to click like down below. If you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button and hit that little bell. Ring my bell, baby. But we're going to go a little off topic. This isn't current. This is like a week old current. I made a video the other day discussing Brian Shaw's Dexa scan. A lot of people didn't like it. They didn't like what I had to say. They're almost like, did you not watch his video? Did you not watch his complaints? That nurse didn't know what she's doing. And it's like, are you guys under the impression that the body fat percentage they gave is wrong? Because if you were to not know how muscle mass affects it and you were to just look at him objectively, does anybody here think he's under 30%? Anybody? If you do, you really need to reassess that. The reason he is 25% is because he has such an enormous amount of muscle that it brings the percentage down. And when I'm saying that, I want people to understand, I don't dislike Brian. I can honestly tell you, based upon having the little bit I've watched of him, Brian strikes me as a very genuine person, strikes me as a very friendly person. Right? He strikes me as the sort of person that would be enjoyable to hang out with or to have around. Okay, he seems like a genuinely pleasant, enjoyable person. Doesn't seem to have a mean bone in his body, not a mean-spirited person in any way. I want to make that clear. I don't think in any way that he is a bad person. Because he seems to be the total opposite of that. Just an initial impression of the guy, basically a gentle giant. Right? Seems like a loyal, reasonable, trustworthy type of person. So, that being said, that's not what we're saying with any of that. But what I am saying is that Brian might be in denial of his own situation, and that's normal. And a lot of the fans are also. And here's what people need to remember. A lot of people are saying, and he's saying, I don't think I could have lost 30, 40, 50 pounds or whatever of lean tissue. Because guys, I'm gonna be honest. If that's the only reason we come up with that number is because of the body fat percentage came back at 25%. Because had it been a lot lower, obviously his lean tissue would have to be higher due to his body weight. So the argument people are making is that that has to be inaccurate. In fact, he looks leaner now than he did at the Arnold. Well, I didn't see the scan done at the Arnold. All we know, there could have been a major issue there. But here's what people are not factoring in. They're not factoring in that this isn't just a really big guy who carries a lot of muscle and a lot of fat from lifting weights and eating. The elephant in the living room, and it also shows that people are not familiar with these things. It's going to be obvious that Brian competing in the world's strongest man is probably not full natty, brah. Nobody carries the muscle or does the lifts that these guys do who are not using very, very, very copious amounts of certain substances. Okay? And anyone who is familiar with these things and has ever watched what happens to people who use them, number one, the effects are not permanent. Okay? Hopefully most of you know that. In other words, a person doesn't go do a bunch of stuff, gain a bunch of muscle, and just keep all of it and look the exact same, hold the same muscle, same intermuscular, water, everything for the next 20 years. It doesn't work that way, right? Most of you are aware of this. Number two, most people are aware that people don't stay on, especially people who compete at high levels in any event. They oftentimes use quantities that they cannot stay on, all right? They can't. Then the guy using, and I don't want to say deadlift, let's call it strongman deadlift because it's not the same as a deadlift. Didn't he strongman deadlift like over 1,000 pounds at that event? Right? Same handful of days where he got that Dexa scan. Okay? I'm going to venture to say a reasonable person would surmise he was probably on pretty hefty doses of creatine. We know that's not what it is, but let's just say that. Creatine, a lot of it. A whole lot of it. Happens when you come off. You shrink. You start losing muscle immediately. Don't you go into a catabolic state? Especially if you're using a lot and you cut it way down to a healthy, sustainable amount. So you go from your loading dose down to your maintenance dose. You know, that loading dose of creatine down to the maintenance amount. Just that one little scoop. You start losing muscle and water immediately. Also, people are talking about well, I think he looks leaner. That's a subjective thing. Maybe he was carrying more water weight that made him look more bloated at the time of the Arnold. So he's dropped some of that water weight, which would count as lean weight, right? Water weight on a Dexa scan is lean tissue. It's not fat. Okay, water is not fat. It will not register as fat weight. All right? So you're losing bloat, you're losing intermuscular water, and you're losing probably significant amounts of muscle tissue. If a person, and this is what everyone knows from the gear world, if a person's on a bunch of stuff and they cycle off and they go on a diet, what happens? They just diet their muscle off because their body has now reached a condition to where it no longer wants muscle tissue. Calorie deficit tends to lose multiple types of tissues in the body, right? And hopefully you guys understand that. If you lose 30 pounds, depending upon the scenario, odds are it's probably not 30 pounds of fat that you lost. Most people understand that, right? Most people do understand that. There's other tissues involved in that 30 pounds usually. Well, your body has different scenarios in which it is preferential towards the amount of ratios of muscle versus fat that you lose. There are scenarios that are so extreme to where you can lose purely fat. I did it on a Dexa scan in one short phase. I had one phase of time where I managed to lose only fat weight. Dexa before I didn't. I lost muscle also. But I did a phase where I lost a fairly small amount of body fat in 90 days of only fat weight. That's fairly rare. But it can happen. What people also don't seem to know is there's also situations to where all the weight you lose can be muscle tissue. Right? You are aware those situations do exist. There are people who have muscle wasting situations. You want to know what a common muscle wasting situation is? Take someone who's in a catabolic situation in which they are medically prescribed a substance that is also a set of substances commonly used by bodybuilders, athletes, strongmen, powerlifters. And they're taken off those prescription substances. They have muscle wasting. A lot of times they lose 20, 30 pounds of muscle really, really fast when they come back off of them. Right? Muscle wasting kicks back in. Okay. See where we're going with this? You come off a lot of that stuff, you go into an extreme catabolic state. In fact, many guys, when they've cycled off, have reported sometimes not only muscle loss, significant muscle loss to the point to where the scale is going down, but in some cases a small amount of body fat gain. Some of them gain a little bit of fat, again due to the change in the hormone profile in their body. So is it unreasonable to think that someone who is big and jacked and strong, who carries a lot of muscle and a lot of fat, that if they go clean and they go in a calorie deficit, because they're already in a situation to where their body is going to be prone to just stripping muscle tissue away, and then you put them in a calorie deficit. It's not unreasonable, and this might come as a shock to a lot of people, but that's not unreasonable to assume all muscle loss, all lean tissue loss in a scenario like that. It is actually possible for a person to lose body weight and gain body fat in that scenario. That's one of the few scenarios in which it could happen. But the thing to consider is that it's not really like he's had significant fat gain there. That's the thing. people need to remember is that oftentimes a change in body fat, if someone has 30 pounds of muscle difference in any direction, your body fat percentage is going to change. Hopefully people understand that. Even if the amount of fat on your body does not change, your percentage will change because you're changing your scale weight that much. And that's kind of the thing that people need to remember with some of these strongman competitors too. The amount that they're eating, the amount of body fat they're carrying, that most of these guys, if on their frame they didn't have that enormous amount of muscle, and they had the amount of muscle of an average guy who just did a little bit of weight, maybe went to the gym a couple times a week, didn't use any stuff, and was a casual gym goer, if they're same height with the same amount of fat that they have, some of these guys would be 30-35%. All right, Brian is in that situation. All right, if he had 100 pounds less muscle tissue, which if you look at those Dexa scans, the amount of muscle he has, it's reasonable to assume that as a result of all of the stuff that he's used and his training and everything else, that he's gained 100 pounds of muscle tissue over the course of his life, of his training career. Like, look, his Dexa scans alone should tell you that. That seems to be the case. So what would happen if he had 100 pounds less muscle with the same amount of fat? It would be like 34-35%. So that's also what you see distributed on his face. And that's why he has the belly and everything else, because he has the body composition per quantity of a man who's 35%. But because he is so robust in terms of musculature, the percentage is brought way down. It's brought way down. But it doesn't mean the quantity isn't there. Okay? And that's just understanding the math, that's understanding the numbers, that's understanding the way these machines read stuff. Right? Understanding how body composition is calculated. This should be apparently obvious. This is just objective facts. It's objective facts. No opinion inserted in that. So people who are making a big deal about this stuff not being accurate, you guys got to quit being fanboys, and people need to understand. Yes, Brian is shocked by all the readings that he got, and he thinks something went wrong. I don't think that's necessarily the case. I mean, we know his height, we know his weight, we can see him. I don't think, based upon my own knowledge and math of body composition, that measurement was actually that far off. That DEXA scan was not particularly inaccurate. And if it was skewed in the wrong direction, meaning his body composition might be a couple percentages worse. If something went wrong with the measurement or she didn't set it up right, I would predict it's more at that case. Okay? More at that case. Not the other way around. Like, there's no way he's like 20% body fat. And that's being realistic and objective when speaking about someone who I actually legitimately believe is probably a nice and a good person. Alright guys, so that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.